Um, this is your third week. We're moving to your new book, The Disability History of the United States. This week's this week's coverage is pretty much the colonial times to the Civil War, and we're going to focus a little bit on the Civil War. I mean, the colonial times and the revolutionary times. This is also the time of the beginning, or really the start of medicalization of the disabled body. This is where medicine starts to grow and move in and take over. As you're reading, you'll see that most of the early relationships with disabled were very personal and family related. So most disabled were taken care of by their families. If for some reason the family couldn't do it, then the disabled person would be taken care of by the town. But we slowly move out of that, mostly to industrialization, somewhat to the fact that more people are becoming disabled, and also to the fact that doctors and medicine is starting to move in. Men who were disabled often were pushed, white men who were disabled were often pushed into the almshouses or the poorhouse. White women who were disabled were often pushed towards being cared for by a family member or a member of the community. Sometimes that member of the community would be paid in order to raise them or to care for them. But we also have slavery and its relationship to the black community, as well as the relationship between the white colonials and early Americans and the native tribes. For the most part, in both cases, those that were disabled bodies or minds, either African American or indigenous, were usually treated very poorly. If the African Americans could function and do hard labor, they were often kept and taken care of by the other slaves. If they could not handle labor, they were often disposed of, sometimes given to doctors for medical experiments or sold to doctors for medical experiments. As for the indigenous, they were either treated by their people or, in some cases, left to die by their people and the government. We're seeing an increase in not just the death of those with disabilities, but also the institutionalizations. We also get to see something else new, and that is war veterans. And in fact, even the Revolutionary War, those veterans were pensioned off and given a more elite status than we had previously seen to those with disabilities. So we're starting to also see a break between the worthy disabled and the non-worthy disabled. And we'll see more of that as eugenics moves in and as we start to look more at the way society functions. Now, as far as eugenics goes, eugenics begins after the Civil War, after Darwin's theory of evolution is published. And this is a social Darwinism. This is a misunderstanding and misrepresentation of Darwin's theories. Eugenics really is this idea that we're evolving in a linear way to a better creature. Now, that's not the way Darwin came up with evolution, and that's certainly not the way the modern evolutionists view the subject. Evolution doesn't put a moral stamp on anything, and it is not a linear trip. Scientists were also confused and had a major misunderstanding of how genetics work. They thought poverty, since you're If your parents were born poor, chances are pretty high you'll be poor. And they mistook the cycle of poverty as a genetic condition. The same with violence. And I'm not saying that this isn't stuff we can see today. We do. We see it with the idea of a addiction gene and the idea of a serial killer gene, trying to blame society's issues on genetic problems. And we'll see more of this also as we go on to the more modern look at the disabled. Aside from this bridge period that we're looking at, we also, you have another paper that will be due. I'm doing it a little different this time. I want you to submit your first draft. Then that first draft is going to be shared among all of you so that you'll get to do a peer grading of a fellow student's paper. And then the final draft will be due next week. So this week you're looking at how disabled, particularly mentally and cognitively, physical disabilities were a little rough at that time period because really they were either livable conditions. Sorry about that. That's my service dog with her toy. They're either livable conditions or they are not. And the fact is that most physically disabled in this time period died from their disability if it was severe enough to prevent them from doing much. Learning disabilities hadn't been an idea yet. So really the main types of disabilities we're looking at are mental, cognitive, and even cognitive. You know, if you could pick up a bale of hay, you were able to work. So even if you couldn't count it, as long as you could physically move it, you were okay. And then we have the sensory, blind and deaf. And that really becomes the problematic disabilities of the time period that much of the focus goes on. For the physically disabled community, most of their disabilities resulted from amputations, or they would have had broken limbs that were incorrectly set, so they might be limps or have trouble moving arms. And of course we also have some of the more strenuous physical disabilities like cerebral palsy, but conditions like paralysis, muscular dystrophy, muscular sclerosis, those conditions didn't exist because the people that had them simply didn't live long enough. So you're going to be writing your paper this week, your second paper, on a condition, on a disabling condition. You do not have to stick with only the ones before the Civil War. You can write about something like muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis. But basically you're just going to be doing a fact-finding essay. Again, it should have at least 3 sources, and it needs to be at least 1,200 words. So nice size. Your first draft can be somewhat smaller because you can maybe get some help from your peers, suggestions, but we're looking for you to go into details about a disabling condition. And I would like it to be a condition of some sort. So you're not just going to go on and talk about what it's like to be deaf. What causes deafness? That's what I'm looking more towards. What causes this disabling condition? And what are the results of it? And it can be mental, it can be physical, it can be cognitive, it can be sensory. It's up to you. All right, good luck. If you have any questions, email me, post on the board, and we'll continue moving along.